hold space for your darkness, a first responder mental health podcast hosted by me, Erin Jane, where we have conversations about what it's like to perform a first responder role and the mental health challenges that can accompany it. Hello and welcome to another episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness, a first responder mental health podcast. I'm your host, Erin Jane, and today I am joined by AK Dozanti. She's a former deputy sheriff and criminal court victim advocate. She has a master's in criminology and victimology. She is a qualified yoga instructor and a first responder wellness coach and specialist. AK is the founder of Lifesaver Wellness Academy. She's a speaker, trainer offering psychoeducation on the phenomenon of burnout, and most recently a published author of Beat the Burnout, which I happen to have in my hot little hands. Thank you for joining us today, AK.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. I feel like this conversation is long overdue. So
Me too. I did disclose to AK on an offline conversation. I was very intimidated to reach out to her because I believe in being honest and authentic, and she's someone that has obviously been around for a long time. And I think I came across you probably like a couple of years ago, and I was just like, man, she's so far ahead of like where I'm at and like is doing so many things that I want to be doing. She wouldn't want to hear from me. And then one day I just went, oh no, fuck it. Like, yeah, us sisters in this like first responder realm, like we gotta stick together. So I reached out and thought, hey, here we are.
Yeah. And then we talked and I'm like, where have you been my whole life? Like, what have we been doing?
I know. So, it's like, yeah, because we have nothing in common. It's
not anything.
It's a tragedy. Yeah. Man. All right. I'm gonna like steer us back on track. So obviously I mentioned you are a former deputy sheriff from out there in Ohio. And I think from some of the stuff I've seen online and obviously reading your book, you became a police officer at a really, really young age, similar to me. What drew you into the field of law enforcement?
Honestly, it just kind of happened. it just chose me, I think.
Yeah.
But I've always had this really strong sense of right and wrong, and it really bothers me when people don't do what I believe is right, which gets me in trouble sometimes because I'm not, I'm not the end all be all of, right and wrong. However, when I went into college, I was undecided. They kind of steered me as to, what fields you would exceed in. Mm-hmm. And they said, legal and, things of that nature and then service things as well. And so I kind of started realizing that fell together in law enforcement. Criminology really interested me, but what really got me was when I went to shadow some undercover online investigations. And then they kind of let me see behind the curtain. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. What do I have to do to get here? I want to do this. And so I became an auxiliary, and I was really valuable to them because I was a young female. So I could do controlled phone calls and make myself sound even younger.
Yeah.
And so at that point I was like, hook, line, and sinker. I'm in.
All in.
Yes. So I was 19 when I started, and then I went to the academy when I was 20, and then, everything just fell in from there.
Wow. And so after being an auxiliary officer, the department that you ended up joining, you spent your entire career there?
Most of it, yeah. I once I graduated with my degree, because that was one of the stipulations. They're like, just finish that out, and then you'll start. So I did the bulk of my career there, and then after I left full-time law enforcement, I stayed on there as a special deputy, and then I went back with a small village for a couple of years after that, just as an auxiliary to hold my commission. And ultimately I let that go, I think in 2022, 2023, something like that.
Yeah. Okay. And so talk about sort of some of the roles that you had when you were there. I know I think I saw something on your page about you worked in part of like the Marine Squad and like I think normal patrol and a few other bits and pieces.
Yeah, so I did court security was where I started, and
Mm-hmm.
then that transitioned into prison transports,
Yep.
and then road patrol, which was the bulk of my career, was on road patrol on afternoon
Mm-hmm.
shift. Um, and along with that, I was working Marine patrol, so I was working on the boat in the waters within that county.
Yep.
So yeah, it was fun stuff.
Wow, that department really had like a whole myriad of like different like things that you could do.
Yeah, yeah, and it was because it was a county, so they had to run the county jail, they had to do courthouse security, all those things.
Right.
So it was, um, yeah, there was a lot to do.
Yeah, sounds like it. And I did read on your bio somewhere that you received Officer of the Year 1 year.
I did, yeah, 2015. I got Officer of the Year, and ironically, that was the same year that later on in the year
Hmm.
I burned out and ended up leaving full time law enforcement.
Yeah, and you talk about it a little bit in your book, but which we will get to. But it came across that you left very abruptly,
Mhm.
or in particular, maybe there was like an internal build up, but from like the outside
Yeah.
perception, it seemed very, very abrupt. Talk to me about how hard that decision was to leave.
Yeah, it was a very much a slow burn and internal buildup because I was very good at masking what was going on. And so for a couple of years I was really struggling. Um, but on paper, from the outside, everything looked great. I just bought a house. I was mid 20s, peak, physical performance. Um, I had a dog. I was in this new relationship. Like everything was going well, seemingly.
Yeah.
Um, and then I started to notice, um, well, in hindsight, I noticed that my body was breaking down along the way. My cognitive abilities were breaking down along the way.
Yeah.
And my emotional, my soul was
Yeah.
just kind of unraveling.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, I was coming back from a kind of impromptu vacation with my now husband.
Mm.
And we had only been dating for a very short time at this point in time. And just at the mere thought of returning to work the following afternoon, um, I experienced what I now know was a panic attack.
Wow.
And we were in the car on the way home, and I was so embarrassed because it was still a new
Yeah.
relationship, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, he's gonna think I'm a lunatic." But ultimately, the next day, I went to the doctor for a sinus infection,
Yeah.
but I also kind of told them what was going on just a little bit. Didn't divulge too much, and they just handed me a prescription and said, "Here, take 2 weeks off." And I was like, "That's it?" Like, and I think they said you should probably go see a counselor or something.
Yeah.
Um, And so I was like, I don't I don't really know what to do with this. I never filled the
Yeah.
prescription. Um, but I did take the 2 weeks off, and then I sat with it for a couple of days, and my husband, or now husband, kind of just looked at me at one point and said, "You don't have to live like this. It doesn't have to be this way."
Oh,
And it never occurred to me until that moment, and I was like, "Oh, I guess you're right. Like I could do
yeah.
something different." Um, and so I, at that point, considered writing my resignation. And from the moment I even considered it
Mm.
to the moment I actually did it, I felt peace. And
Yeah.
then I continued to feel peace. And that's how I knew I made the right decision for me.
Yeah. And can I say what powerful words that was from your now husband, then boyfriend? Because for when you're in that world, there is nothing else.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I believe, and not to pry, but I believe he's not in the job. He's not in the first responder realm.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. He,
Um,
Yeah, so
Yeah.
he's never been like necessarily in that culture, so he's
Yeah.
never been in the echo chamber
Yeah.
of that. And so to have somebody from outside the echo chamber say something that you're like, "Wait a second. What is this?" And he
Yeah.
didn't know that that I had severe depression, PTSD, suicidal ideation, and what I later found out was adrenal fatigue. He didn't know all that was brewing under the surface. I'm sure he had indicators that there was something.
Yeah.
So it really was a pivotal moment for sure.
Mm-hmm. And I think as well, I think anyone listening, when we've wrestled with really difficult decisions, there is no better feeling of like de-stress and calm when you make, like, I think it makes it known that you've actually made the right call when you feel at peace after you've made it. Like there's
Hmm.
just like the way that your body relaxes, and then you're like, that was exactly the right call, like
Yeah.
without a shadow of a doubt.
And yes, and my body relaxed and I felt that like internal sense of safety. Now my mind was reeling because
Oh
I was like,
God.
did I make the right decision? What are people going to think? How am I going to, what am I going to do now? Because I didn't have a plan.
Yep.
Um, so my mind it was kind of in one place, but I could
Mm,
feel the peace in my body and I kind of just stayed there.
yeah.
Um, and there were lots of times where I had to remind myself, like,
Yeah.
no, this is the right move. There was some kind of discernment deep
Yeah.
within me that knew that that was the right move.
Yeah. And your head just kind of had to catch up.
Yes.
Um,
Yep.
and so you fortunately went on to, and that was actually going to be one of like my questions, like, but either before you left or had you already left when you transitioned into the victim advocate role, because it was with the same department, just with like their prosecution's office.
Yeah, so it was within the same county. And it actually, when I left, I had no plan. But within that month, this came up. They said, "Hey, the prosecutor's office is looking for another victim advocate. Um, you'd be perfect for it. You're
Yeah.
overqualified." And I was like, "Well, it's a pretty big pay cut. I have no
Yeah.
idea what I'm doing, but it's a
It's a
job."
job. Yeah.
And that, so I had about a month in between. And
Mhm.
interestingly, I slept for about 18 hours a day every single day because I had kind of like this restraint collapse where my system was like,
Yes.
you can rest now. And I
Yeah.
was very angry because I had a lot of things I wanted to get
Yeah.
done. But I wanted to enjoy my time off and not just
Yeah.
sleep. But my body had other plans. But
Yeah.
I went into that role, and it's very interesting looking back now the way all the pavers were put out in front of me and all I had to do was just keep stepping and keep stepping and keep stepping, because
Yeah.
then that introduced me to the world of victimology, which is where I
Mhm.
got my master's degree in criminology and victimology. And that's where I started to learn about trauma. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, well, this is making a lot of sense now. So,
My goodness. And we'll probably like talk about it a little bit more, but I feel like there's something else that we probably have in common. And it's like, obviously with victimology and criminology, there's a lot of, psychology education that's kind of wrapped up
yeah.
into that. And I've been like the same with like some of my studies. And do you just have, and I know you're like moved on from that a little bit now, but it's like these freaking like bells going off in your head when you learn either like different concepts and constructs and like explanations, and you just go, oh my God, that's why. Like this illuminating reason, or like now being able to interpret and understand either parts of your behavior, things that happen, ways you responded and reacted. Like one that I know for me was so just I don't know if like even overwhelming, but like in a powerful way, was like learning about the stress response, and all we hear fight or flight, fight or flight, fight or flight, and understanding and learning about freeze and fawn. And you went like
Yes.
like going like, because we can't which, you know, we'll get to, but it's like, you can't control how you respond in certain situations. You can't control how your body responds and how your stress response like kicks into gear. And I think there's, especially for, you know, people like us who've been police officers, and that's like a full-on freaking job where you got to wrestle with people and you got to like be on your game and you know, be ready to freaking fight with the best of them. So you anticipate sometimes that you'll react in a certain way, but then perhaps maybe in your life off duty, you kind of think you're going to be the same. And then you have like the complete opposite response. And you're like, that's not the me that I know. That's not the me that other people would know. Like, why have I responded like that? So then, you know, just, I feel like when you study psychology and counseling and all of like the different bits and pieces, it's just like finding pieces of jigsaw puzzles that you never knew were missing.
Yes. Yes. All the yes.
Sorry, I went on a total rant. I'm sorry.
No, but I'm sitting here like a bobblehead going, yes, because I definitely experienced that, because I started diving into this world of victimology, and then understanding trauma, and then understanding the physiology of it. At the same time, I'm working with victims, and I'm hearing all of these same patterns and trends, and I'm very good at picking up on patterns.
Yeah.
And then around that same time, I'm also going through a 200-hour, 10-month yoga teacher training.
Wow.
And so I'm learning about how the body works and how the physiology of different things works, and then different modalities of healing the body from these stress responses. And so you said, I think, alarm bells. I was getting like lightning and thunder and like getting smacked across the face with like a big tsunami of oh my gosh, because I was like also in real time experiencing the different layers and levels of healing that. And then it almost became addictive, because I was like, I got to figure myself out to fix myself. And so for a long time, that was driving me into overdrive, into more burnout. Because I was doing all those things, plus planning a wedding, plus teaching yoga, plus working full time. And, you know, I was driving myself towards another burnout, and trying to fix myself. And what I had to realize, one of the biggest pivots that I made, was that if we're always coming from a place of trying to fix ourselves, then if our baseline's here, we're always coming in under baseline. And when you fix yourself, you're just meeting the baseline. But if you change your viewpoint of, no, I'm already at baseline. Now it's progress, it's growth, it's evolution, it's, you know, upward movement, forward movement, not just fixing all the time, not just fixing the potholes, but building the on-ramp. That was what started. That was the biggest shift in propelling me out of that survival mode. And I know that's kind of a little bit of a tangent, but it truly, we get stuck in this like addiction of like learning about ourselves and fixing ourselves and all of that. But if you're not actually implementing it, it's just hoarding information.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think as well, like you're saying, instead of just kind of staying put and just kind of trying to reach that baseline, like something that I sort of, or like an evolution I went through was there's a lot of power in forgiving yourself for things from your past, for like not knowing better, coping the best you could at the time with the knowledge that you have. And you go, I'm not going to beat myself up about that because I didn't know then and I survived and here I am. So now I can say thank you for like getting me through a really hard point, even if the way I coped was maladaptive or it wasn't like the greatest outcome. But you know what? I'm still here. And because of that experience, now I know better and I can reach higher, achieve more, all that kind of thing. And then just learning to, have that that self-compassion, I think, is so powerful, because it just, like you said, changes that mindset of like, I'm going to beat myself up from like things I did when I was like, like 20 years old, as opposed to like, yeah, no, that's okay. That was then. And I don't have to like it, but I can appreciate it for the experience that it was. And now I know better and move on and evolve and grow, like you said.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people get stuck there because they hold on to like shame and embarrassment, and they get so consumed with what how other people are going to perceive them based on their past. And you got to let that shit go. Because it's not serving you, and you can't control how other people are going to see you. No matter what you do, you could be Mother Teresa. There's probably people out there that don't like Mother Teresa. There's probably people out there that don't like, the greatest people on earth. And that's not any of our business,
Exactly.
So we got to learn how to let that stuff go and love your past self as much as your future self.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining me on that tangent.
Anytime.
I feel like this podcast is going to be full of them, so strap in, people. So how long did you work in that victim advocate role?
Just under 5 years.
Okay, cool. And I guess one thing would have been interesting too, and I feels like it would have sort of tied in really well with getting your master's. Like, there's that not conversation, but that commentary is a better word of people being like, and I'm going to say she, because majority of the time, there might be like a female victim with a male perpetrator. And when it comes to like interpersonal violence or something like that, and there's always that thing of like, why didn't she just leave? No. And then when you understand that even when something like a relationship is bad for us, right? If that's what our body knows, because either from our childhood experiences or we're so used to the way that dynamic makes our system feel and react, even if something's better, because it doesn't feel normal to us, it can sort of feel wrong. So I guess I'm wondering how often you sort of saw that kind of pattern of these people who logically knew that they shouldn't be with this person or be in this relationship, but would continue to kind of like return to it because it was essentially what their system knew.
All the time. And that's actually what drove me to draw the parallel in my book that I talk about frontline service attachment, because it literally becomes a biological attachment at that point, because it's not just what's familiar. It's because there's a cycle that's created, and there's a cycle of, tension building. And so in toxic relationships, abusive relationships, there's the tension building, the explosion, and then afterwards is like the honeymoon phase, that love bombing. And so our system starts to get used to, after the explosion part, there's this relief that comes. There's the love bombing. There's all the oxytocin and all the dopamine and all the good
I'll never
chemicals.
do it again. I love you so much. No.
Right. And their system gets used to that. So just like how we train a dog, it sounds terrible, but it's just biology, right?
Yep.
And so in frontline service attachment that I talk about, it's kind of the same thing. We have these stressors. We get dispatched to a call. We experience the stress of it, potentially even experience some trauma of it or through it. And then we have some relief because we clear the scene. Most of the time, everybody leaves okay. Get a pat on the back. Good job. Attaboy, attagirl. You get a little dopamine hit from that. You survived, so you get an extra little dopamine hit from that. And then you're right back in service. But that right back in service has you bypassing any resolution from the stress or the trauma. And so you're suppressing it. And if you're not actively expressing it, you're actively suppressing it. And it just builds over time. But your body gets used to that. So your body gets used to, I don't care what the call brings, the stress, the trauma, whatever, I'm going to get an attaboy at the end of this, and it's going to feel good. And I'm going to get the relief. right? So our system drives for that relief. But in the meantime, we collect a lot of other stuff that usually goes unresolved.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, like the stress response, it's a process. So when we're not completing the process like you talk about in your book, it's got nowhere to go. So our brain isn't processing the traumatic memories effectively, and neither is our body. And then we, how much of like the memory loss and inflammation and all of the things that go along with it, like when we're not completing the cycle, when we're not, I guess, like down regulating our system, it's exactly what we see in this community. People with so many mental health issues and diagnoses and suicide rates and all of the things, because people are not processing and getting themselves right.
And I think a lot of it too is we just don't recognize it, because a lot of our stress, right? Well, a lot of our stress feels, it comes from adrenaline, and adrenaline feels a lot like dopamine. It makes you feel really alive, but it comes along with the cortisol that's taken years off of your life. And so you have to be able to recognize it for what it is, because in our brains, we've trained ourselves to say, this is exciting. Most people are terrified, but we've trained ourselves to say, this is exciting and I'm going to move toward it. But we have to still recognize what's happening in our body and the chain reaction that's occurring at the same time.
Absolutely. And so talk to me about how, like, I guess you had, your own experience, and it sounds like there was through, your yoga instructing and your education and all that kind of thing. It seems like there was like a bit of a personal, internal psychological reckoning that, you did with yourself, but then turning that spotlight out and recognizing how much of a need there was in like that first responder community. Either like, when did you sort of recognize that greater need, or feel that pull towards like either like the coaching or the psychoeducation or all that kind of thing? Talk to me about that process for you.
Yeah. So in 2020 is when I left that advocacy position. And we were in the middle of a pandemic, and I had a toddler. And so I was like, I'm just going to take a couple months off and kind of, let myself just be for a minute, and I was grateful enough to have that opportunity. And so I took a few months off, and I felt like I had no direction. I was like, do I go the yoga direction, or do I go the law enforcement direction? Like, where do I need to go? Because I still had my commission as a law enforcement, but as a mom at that point, I couldn't reconcile like getting back into uniform full time. So I just sat with it for a while, and all of a sudden one day just hit me like a lightning bolt, and I was like, duh, put it all together. Like, if I can get to this place over the last few years with just the things that I've done, and I've done all these certifications, all these trainings, all this learning, all this research, because I'm a nerd. I was like, duh, why don't I just put it all together and take it back to the people who need it most? And so I did. So early 2021, it actually started out as a yoga app that I was going to just have like a small section for first responders. And somebody was like, why are you playing small? Just go all in with the first responder thing. And I was like,
go big or go home.
because I had so many limiting beliefs that people weren't gonna understand it, and they were gonna just dismiss it right away. And the more I started talking to people about it, and the more I started explaining the science behind it, and making it really consumable and simple to grasp, the more people were like, wow, this makes way too much sense. And so I did. I went all in. I created Lifesaver Wellness. I have always been told that I should be a coach of some sort, and just be like a mentor type person for people. And so I was like, well, let's develop a framework and put some curriculums together. And I again, am a nerd, so that was a lot of fun for me. And
it's all right. I'm right there with you. Don't you worry.
yeah. So I did that, and then I started doing trainings for fire departments and police departments, and it took off from there. And 4 years later, I don't I don't know, 4 or 5 years later, here we are. And yes, 4 years. And yeah, so that's, it just kind of evolved, but it just made, again, it's one of those, it just made sense. It was like, it was almost decided for me. I just had to get on board.
Yeah. Oh, I love that for you. And it's, again, that was like part of the intimidating factor that I spoke about at the start of this conversation. I'm like, I want to like get to a point where I'm doing that. And for me, it's like finding the balls, finding the confidence to kind of put yourself out there. It's tricky and it's challenging. And I love that you took everything, all of your wealth of knowledge and everything. And from my perspective, so incredibly inspiring, because it's kind of like, yes, cool. This is a thing. This is like, and what I love, because I know, Erin, is it Maccabee?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like she's out there doing similar kind of things. Like there is so many of us, and there's no, like, we don't need to be like, I mean, I don't think we would ever think that way, but as in like, people want to pit people against each other in a competition. It's like, no. I'm like, no, I'm like, this is a community. This is support. This is, yes.
There are way too many first responders that need us out there to stand in the gap. There's no need for the competition. I don't have time for it. I don't I have two small children. I don't have time for a whole lot of things. So I don't have the time or the patience for drama.
No.
And it's too important of work to be at odds with anybody who's also trying to help people.
Absolutely.
There's just no use for it.
And so I think like kudos to you for doing what you do. And I know that it takes time away from your family and all that kind of thing. And I think we're similar like that. It's like, it has to be pretty freaking important for us to want to take time away from our we're both boy mums. We really ride that train hard. So for us wanting to, we have to feel really passionately and live with purpose and have that authenticity to be like, this is so important. I'm going to take time away. And it's because like, additionally, like I've walked in your shoes. I'm never going to have done exactly what you've done, but I know what it's like with that sense of adrenaline when you are driving hot to a job. And I know what it does to our body. I think just having that lived experience gives us like a differing level of credibility and I think like a sense of camaraderie that is important to penetrate first responders, because we can be a bit of a closed off community at times.
A tough audience. Yes.
Tough crowd. Exactly.
And I don't want to skate over your kind words. I so appreciate that. And I appreciate what you do. Like you are a voice for people. You are bringing other voices forward with your platform. So don't ever discount what you're doing, because honestly, the list of things that I want to be doing and I feel like I'm so far behind is so long. And so you can never compare yourself to somebody else, because we're in the same direction. We're just on different paths. And so don't ever discount what you're doing, because it's incredible.
I appreciate that. I think there's been a lot of personal reckoning in like the last few years for me, and just gaining that, I think, coming out of just the trenches of motherhood, and then being able to go oh no, like I'm an actual person still, and I have goals and dreams like? And you're so close. I will lift you up. Don't worry about it, babe.
Thank you.
Oh my God. It's yeah, I think for me, like, as well, like, I turned 40 last year, and it's just like, this is my decade. This is the
Yes.
decade about me, about like my, like I've been out of law enforcement for 10 years now, and I've been the spouse of a first responder for, oh God, 11 years. So it's like the roles are very different, but the knowledge permeates both, and being able to
Mm-hmm.
help people in the same way. Like, I think it's really important, because first responders and first responder families, they need the right kind of help.
Yes.
And if it's the wrong, it's almost more detrimental than, like, I think sometimes in the civilian world, because it'll
Yeah.
just, cascade
Well, yeah,
poorly.
because it's already like pulling teeth
Yeah,
to
exactly.
accept any kind of support. And if it's the wrong support, then it's like, okay, now you've got my teeth, and what am I going to
Yeah,
do now? So yes, yeah.
exactly. And so and forgive my ignorance, but was burnout one of your core components, or is that something that's kind of like developed over time with your like speaking engagements and training, and the like coaching and wellness academy?
So burnout's always been kind of at the forefront of it, because
Mm-hmm.
it took me a while to realize that that's what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it took a lot of hindsight, because I remember I said I burned out from law enforcement, and then I almost burned
Yeah.
out during my advocacy years. And what I had to realize was that it was because my nervous system was stuck in the on position.
Yeah.
My mindset, I was operating from a place of, you've got to be perfect because otherwise you're not good enough. And so it was just this overdrive. And
Mm-hmm.
um, so from the very beginning, I think my first um, workshop that I did was Beat the Burnout Boot Camp. So Beat the Burnout has been a thing
Wow.
since the very beginning.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that it's something that we have, in the first responder culture, we've come to normalize it,
Mm.
because we say, well, everybody's burned out.
Yeah.
Well,
Everyone's exhausted. Everyone's, yeah.
let's not normalize it. No, let's not just accept that
Yeah.
blindly and say, well, that's just the way it is,
Mm.
because it doesn't have to be. And so what most people don't realize, and this is why I'm so passionate about it, is the final stage of burnout in the 12 stages is suicide, or wanting to not be in your own life anymore.
Yeah.
And I that doesn't sit well with me, because we're normalizing this slow burn.
Yeah.
But what happens when all that's left
As
are
a
the
result.
ashes?
Yeah.
And then we go, wait, what happened? And it's like, well, you normalized the silence, you
Yeah.
normalized the overdrive, you normalized sacrificing yourself for a job that's not paying you dividends,
Yeah.
or
It's
you're
not a
you're
reciprocal relationship.
yes, like, and you've put your entire identity and personality into this thing. And what happens when it goes away?
Yeah.
And so it's so important to me to catch people in that middle ground before it
Mm-hmm.
becomes a mental health disorder, before it becomes, detrimental, or something that where they've, you know, on their fourth divorce, and they've got a raging alcohol problem and can't seem to show up to work on time, and all of these
Yeah.
other things where it's affecting their life and their performance at work.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think, like, you would equally know, anyone who's in this realm knows of the awful and generalized statistic that we lose more people to suicide than in a line of duty death. And that's, I mean, horrific. It's horrific that we lose people at all. And that, again, though, it's also like, well, so yeah, someone takes their life. Is that not related to their job? Probably 9 times out of 10 it is. And
Yeah.
that's like one of the things that equally I bang on about. I'm like, it's like proactive, preventative, like, it doesn't have to get to that point. And so actually explain what you mean by burnout, because I think it's something that we hear a lot about, and I don't think everyone completely understands what it means.
Yeah. So the best way to explain it is just to give you like the three main components,
Mhm.
which is the mental, physical, emotional exhaustion, the cynicism, which is basically, we hear it all the time. It's the sarcasm, the skepticism, um, and it's what it is basically is just a psychological distancing,
Yeah.
right? Like I don't like that thing, or I don't understand that thing, so I'm gonna shit on it because I don't get it, and so I'm just
Yeah.
I'm gonna distance myself from it.
Yeah.
Or conversely, sometimes it's I actually do want that thing,
Yeah.
but I don't. I either I can't have it, or I don't believe that I can have it. So I'm going to put distance between myself and that thing, because otherwise it's too painful to accept that I can't have it.
Yeah.
So you hear this a lot, like right after a breakup, like all the cynical things that they say right after, and it's like, wait a second, you loved her yesterday, like hold on. Just as an example, but then that
Yeah.
third piece is a low sense of self-efficacy, or
Yeah.
basically not feeling like you make a difference or an impact anymore. And so it's just kind of like this daily grind, this low hum of, why am I even doing this? Why
Yeah.
do I keep showing up? It's the same shit, different day. This constant loop of really
Yeah.
not feeling like you're moving the needle. And I feel like law enforcement feels that more than,
You're like, yeah,
yeah,
preaching to the choir.
yeah. I think law enforcement and dispatch, and probably corrections as well, probably feel that more because they're dealing usually with the same people all the time, and they just keep getting out and coming
Yeah.
right back. And yeah, so.
And I feel like it's like you're saying, more particularly in like the kind of law enforcement realm, it's like that drumbeat that underplays
Mm.
everything that we do. So like I'm married to a firefighter. And so regardless of like what job they do, even if it's like a bit of a nothing job, or if it's like on like Donkey Kong, like there's some kind of like resolution. Whereas like I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and they were saying they actually said it to me, and it made it kind of like twig in my head. There's a uniqueness for law enforcement, for corrections, like you said, that it's not just the incident and then we get to walk away. Like law enforcement, like we will have, like you have to conduct an investigation, you have to take the statements. Like I know in my role, we would have to investigate like unexpected deaths, so which suicide fell under the realm of. So it's like I would attend a suicide scene and then have to, potentially notify relatives. And then I would have to investigate the circumstances, basically learn everything about this person that I only knew in death, which would mean taking statements from their husband, wife, their parents, their kid, like, and it's like, it's so much longer drawn out and tragic that it
Mhm.
is one thing that I think in that first responder realm is just like that little bit different than, any of the other people that kind of show up on scene. Like their thing just
Yeah.
ends as soon as they walk away, and ours never did.
Right. Yes. And that reminded me of, other circumstances where now you're talking to people that you're potentially you're asking questions that could be accusatory. So I had a suicide of an elderly woman who shot herself in the chest, and the husband had left the house for just a few minutes, and then she did it, and he came back. Under those circumstances, you have to check for gunshot residue on the
Yep.
husband.
Yep.
And so I've got this elderly couple, and I'm like, uh
Oh,
and
so
but you have
awkward.
to do your job. You have to ensure that it wasn't a homicide. And so little things like that. And then weeks later, the GSR results are coming back, and then you've got, so it draws out, and you become much more attached,
Yeah.
because now you've got this thing in the back of your mind while you're waiting for the results, and now you've got
Mhm.
this, this other this evidence that you have to log in, and all these different components that you then kind of collect as you go. You collect multiple things that are all happening at the same time. So now you've got 12 cases that are all in different stages at any given time.
Yeah.
And it's a lot to carry. And I think that's why, detectives oftentimes are really struggling with burnout, because it's this ongoing thing all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. As a former one, yes, I think I would struggle to remember when I would have leave and I didn't get sick, because like your body just finally went. And it was like you were saying, in your gap between leaving your sheriff position and starting at the prosecutor's office, like your body just like wants to shut down, and you kind of just go. And I worked at the armed crime squad towards like the end of my career, and people like one of my girlfriends worked there for like 10 years, and it's big jobs, big results, huge resources, huge time factors. Like you could easily work 17, 18 hours every single day and still have to show back up the next morning.
Yeah.
And you would just like, and you were just like a zombie, like or like a lemming, or I don't even know what like the analogies. You would just freaking march every single day. And then I was just like, and probably the only thing, I would still get up at 5 a.m. to like go to the gym, because I'm like, this is the only thing that's going to keep me sane, and I'm probably going to be even more sleep deprived, but it's like the one thing I get to do for myself every day. Like, so yeah, that drum beat, and in particular, you put all that time and effort in, you make those heartfelt connections with victims of crime, witnesses, like you're talking years to like take things to trial, take things to contest, all of the things you're having these interactions with them. And then there's that drumbeat, like you were saying, of like the lack of fulfillment, or almost like a lack of purpose when you put in all of that hard work, and then they just get like a slap on the wrist or something like that, and you're just like, why do I bother?
Yep. Yeah. And that was something that was very eye-opening when I went from law enforcement to the prosecution side of things. Because I didn't realize, you get enough probable cause to make the arrest or whatever, and charge, but then actually getting the charges to stick obviously we know it's a higher burden of proof, but I didn't realize until I got in there how much harder it is, because then you've got a defense attorney arguing everything, and then you've got a judge who's looking at you like, huh? And so that, I think, helped me to kind of reconcile some of those cases that didn't go through, because it's a higher burden of proof. So you get them into the system, and you're not always going to win. And that sucks. It just does. Because we can know in our hearts and in our gut, in our cop mind, that they're guilty, but proving it is something totally different. And
absolutely.
So yeah, that was helpful for me to kind of reconcile some of those past things, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. It's yes, the ones that stick in your craw. You're like,
yes.
You're like, hopefully, like the karma train comes and gets you instead, mate.
yes. And I had some because I switched kind of rapidly. I had some that I had been the charging officer, and I was assigned to be the advocate, and I was like, this is a conflict of interest. Somebody else needs to take this case.
Step away from this one. Exactly. Yeah. And so you've explained what like the components are of burnout, and I think we can understand how prevalent it is. Like I even did a paper this semester on one of the aspects was burnout in amongst the first responder population. Talk to me about, and I know you're not a doctor, but is there part of you that is kind of like, I think this needs to be considered either like a mental health condition, or where do you think the the future of it is going, because from my understanding at the moment, it's considered a quote unquote occupational phenomenon that's been
Yep.
recognized by the World Health Organization, but it's
Yes.
not in the DSM-5 or anything like that. Where do you think it's kind of going to go in that respect?
I think that it's it's certainly recognized by mental health professionals, to the point where insurance companies are now recognizing it for like FMLA leave and things like
Oh,
that. And
yep.
EAPs are starting to recognize it, and
Okay, that's
HR and
awesome.
all of that. So that's super helpful. I don't know how I feel about it being necessarily like in the DSM-5 or anything like that, because I don't feel like it's a disorder, because it's
Hmm.
actually your body just
Yeah.
operating exactly how it's supposed to and saying, "Hey, you need to change up your circumstances." But
You
I
consider it more like
do,
a symptom over like a part of the symptomology of something.
yeah, I think that employers and EAP and HR and all of that recognizing it is an incredible step forward.
Hmm.
Um, and acknowledging that, maybe some time off is needed, maybe some accommodations are needed in the interim.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know that it needs to be its own diagnosis, because it's a symptom of, it's basically a dysregulated nervous system stuck in either in the on position or the off
Hmm.
position. Sometimes it's toggling back and forth,
Yeah.
or like a functional freeze. That's what I see most often with first responders in
Hmm.
burnout, is that they're super effective at work, and they
Yeah.
can go and be connected and be sociable and 100%, and then they come home and they freeze, and all of a sudden they're the
Yeah.
grumpy bear in the lazy boy chair.
They got
And
nothing left to give.
right, and so it's dysregulation on one end, being driven by stress, and then dysregulation on the other end of just, total shutdown. And
Yeah.
so um I don't think that it would be hard to diagnose, but I don't know that it needs to have its own
Yeah.
category.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's a very interesting dichotomy too, to like having the, like you're saying, like, the switching between when we're like in our on situation for to be at work, and then off when we're at home. And there was, I'd love to sort of hear as well. So I think one of the things that like we come up against when we're trying to help people in this community, and especially on like the spouse side, and you used an analogy about like trying to sort through, I think, like a collection of paper clips or something like that, um, in your book, that as in like trying to sort out mental health conditions and symptoms and all that kind of thing. But I think one of the things that like we struggle with, so you've got like, it's we're having this conversation in June, it's PTSD awareness month. Obviously burnout probably gets like looped into like one of like the symptoms of PTSD. We've got depression, we've got all the different things. I think some of the effects of the roles that we do also show up and mirror a lot of the symptoms of PTSD and burnout and all of the things. And it's something, I think we wrestle with when like we speak with coaching clients. I think it's something we wrestle with when we're speaking with first responders, when we're speaking with their spouses or that kind of thing. Like, I guess maybe talk to me about how people can differentiate, because is someone showing up because they've just had like a long shift and they're tired, or are they burnt out? Are they hypervigilant because they're still kind of switched on, or they got PTSD? Like, sort of, yeah, talk to me about. There's a bit of a word salad question. I apologize, but yeah, like
I'm tracking. It's okay.
but yeah, so like I've like, and even like in like my personal life, like I have a first responder partner who comes home after a 24-hour shift, who is like exhausted and sometimes cranky and all of those things, and you're kind of like, okay, like what am I seeing? And I think in particular
Yeah.
for spouses, it's really hard to discern. So if you can share some thoughts on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in this day and age of social media and the wealth of information that's out there, I think sometimes we try to jump to putting labels on things,
Mhm.
and saying, well, that's anxiety, or you've got PTSD, or you're depressed, or whatever the case is. And I think more important than trying to figure out what it is, because honestly, there are days where I'm like, okay, is this residual PTSD? Is this my ADHD? Is this just mom brain? Like, what's going on? And so we do that, and we're like, is this depression? Is it anxiety? Am I just an asshole? Like, why? you know. So we try to figure it out. We try to put a label on it, and that's
Yeah.
normal and natural because our brains just try to make meaning of things.
Mhm.
But I think more than anything, it's recognizing that almost all of those things overlap. Um, and if you were to do a Venn diagram with 7 of these all different things, and you put together the things that overlap within them, what it usually all comes down to is a dysregulated nervous system.
Mhm.
So it's just a nervous system that isn't getting the proper care that it needs. It isn't getting the proper rest that it needs,
Yeah.
or the proper acknowledgement of what it's experiencing. Um, and so that shows up in, we get short and snappy and irritable. Um, Maybe it shows up in muscle tension. Maybe it's frequent illnesses and infections. Maybe it's just a difficulty concentrating, or forgetfulness, or, it's just a myriad of
Yeah.
things. But it all comes down to the nervous system
Yeah.
and the communication between your nervous system and your brain.
Mhm.
And so a lot of times we think that we can do this mind over matter thing because David Goggins did it. But
He's
truthfully,
mental. Absolutely
he
mental.
is his own person, and
Mhm.
there is no one else like him on the planet. So
No.
we, for the rest of us, the communication between the brain and body is 80% of it is from the body up to the brain, and only
Mhm.
20% is brain down to the body.
Yeah.
And so mind over matter is really, really hard if you're not using your body as well.
Yeah.
So making sure you're getting enough rest, making sure that you're eating properly and you're not just grabbing crap all the time. Uh, the biggest thing, and one of the biggest things that we tend to push off, is safe and healthy connections with other human beings.
Mhm.
But that's a tough one if you don't feel like you're safe within yourself to make that connection.
Yeah.
Um, but exercise, sunlight, drinking enough water, all of these
Mhm.
things are actually very important to your mental health. They are repeated ad nauseum for a
Mhm.
reason,
Yeah.
because they actually do help when
Yeah,
you
they're
keep
like
up
the
with them.
building blocks to have a healthy one. Exactly.
Yes, yes. And so in situations where you're supporting somebody in that way, um, or you're supporting somebody that's struggling and you're just trying to figure out like what's going on with them, um, it can be, really hard, because if they're not willing to take any action, I think most importantly, it's not about trying to fix them,
Mm.
but just approaching it with curiosity, asking questions. How can I support you today?
Yeah.
Not like, and here's the thing. When you're dysregulated, you might hear, "Did you drink enough water today?" as a personal attack on your character.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like,
Yeah, there was a hidden FU in there.
right, like it's kind of like walking a tightrope. Because if you're super dysregulated, you might not be as receptive. But I think it's just being that support, listening, and lovingly sharing what you're seeing,
Yeah.
um, and mirroring it back, just like my husband did to me, like
Yeah.
saying, he got me out of the echo chamber just by
Yeah.
saying, you don't have to live like this.
Yeah.
So being that loving, supportive person, and but also, like, you don't have to take a bunch of shit either. Like, if the person's being awful to you,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that you just,
It's a
lay down and
fine
become a
line.
doormat.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And so it is a fine line. And so I think it depends on the individuals, but
Mm-hmm.
not trying to constantly fix, just being supportive, focus on the basics, um, and just being there. Presence can be very powerful.
Yep. Yep. And I think thank you for sharing that, because I think it's really important. And I know even with like all of my knowledge and experience, like it's hard to have those conversations with the people that we love. It's like trying to find the right moment when they're not like about to go to work, or they're just come home from work, or they've been awake for 40 hours, and all of the things. It's really challenging and can be very overwhelming to try to tell the people that we love, I'm worried about you. I'm seeing something that's worrying me, scaring me. Do you know how you're showing up? Because this is what it is from our perspective. And so I think you're right. Even just like focusing on those the core basic things can have such a monumental impact that I think we forget easily.
Yeah.
Talk to me about, as I pull it from the thing, talk to me about Beat the Burnout, which, and I will freely admit, I have a pencil because I underline like a giant nerd, and I'm only halfway through, so I have not got to the conclusion of it yet, unfortunately. Talk to me about where it came from. Is this something you always wanted to write? What the process was like, and all of the things.
Well, the process was long because I delusionally thought that I could start writing it um when I was like 8 months pregnant. And I was like, "Oh, I'm going to have all kinds of time off
Yeah.
coming up." Yeah, no.
I got to that part in the book, and wow, you were very delusional.
Yes, I was. For some reason I was like, because I had so much content. I was like, I could knock
Just
this
like
out
copy
in
and paste.
6 weeks. Yeah, just no big deal. It took a year and a half because we moved the day before I had my second child. So um, it got put on hold for just a little bit. And truthfully, I put so much research into it because I do have a little bit of drive to be perfect. I don't like the thought. I guess I'll just, if I'm going to psychoanalyze myself, it's coming from a place of fear that somebody's going to read something and disagree with it. And I'm like, so I gotta, I'm like, let me back it up with all the science.
But as well
So
though, you're talking about a lot of things that to be able to speak with it like as an authority, all you're doing is just backing it up. It's like,
mhm.
and it's great. Like we talked offline, and I think I was like talking about like my giant list of journal articles that I've collated, and you were like, wait till you get to the back of my book.
Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah.
you're gonna be so excited.
Yes,
But
yes,
yeah, like
yes.
it's no, you just like it's you essentially you cite everything that is medically based or psychologically based, you cite it, which I think
Mhm.
adds an incredible amount of credibility to everything that you're talking about. So please
Oh,
continue. But
thank you. Well, and I appreciate that because it wasn't just, let me Google an
yeah,
article. It was, let me pull up the actual research journal. Let me pull up the empirical data.
yeah,
Um, because I mean, luckily I have the background and the masters to know how to research. But I see all too often people who are well intended in this first responder wellness space just Googling things and then getting in front of an audience of people and repeating them. And it's dangerous because Google's
Yeah.
not always right.
Yeah.
And if you start to dig into the articles, you basically find that it was just, they just cited another article that cited another article that cited another article.
It
And
gets
there was
lost in
never any,
translation.
yeah, there was never any evidence basis for it. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now, but no, it kind of came about, just as again, like a natural evolution from the speaking,
Mhm.
um, somewhere along the lines from the dozens of podcasts and speaking engagements, people told me I had a powerful story. And I was like, "Meh, okay. I mean, it's nothing special, but I think that's what makes it relatable.
Yeah.
And if I can use my misfortunes, as fuel for, uh, lessons for other people,
Mhm.
then, why not collect them in a book and make it a really affordable option? And so I did. And it was quite the journey. It drudged up a lot of stuff. And I can say even though it drudged up a lot, we've barely even scratched the surface.
Yeah.
So, um, more to come. But yeah, so it's been great though. I've had, the whole point of it was just to help people
Yeah.
and provide a voice for people who maybe don't have a platform, maybe um don't even have the language yet to express what they're feeling.
Mhm.
So to give them that, I've had people, some of the best messages I've gotten are people who've said, I took this into my therapy appointment and read them this section, and I was able to
Oh.
explain what I was experiencing. And I was like, well, there it is.
Wow. You're like,
That's
I can
my
retire
job here
tomorrow.
is done. Yeah. And so, that's
Yeah.
giving, helping empower people and giving
Yeah.
them that language is the best gift, um, that I can hear back, as far as feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. And as someone who, granted, just over halfway, but it's quite like it's, I don't know if it's like anything I've actually ever read before, because it is this really like interesting mixture of like, it's kind of like psychoeducation, and you like, even though you've got like your sources, like you you break down like the concept of burnout and the systems of the body, and how we are affected as humans and equally as first responders. And you've kind of got like tips and strategies, and like, in terms of like how to recover and how to cope and how to prevent it. And then you sort of loop in some of like your personal touchstones, so it's quite like I don't know, it's like an eclectic mix. But I think it comes across like how much you've put into it, like not only just the research, but yes, also like you're saying that kind of like personal reckoning, because I can, like, reading it, I can imagine that there are parts of it that you've, kind of put out from like the recesses of your past that you probably have left alone for like a really long time. And so
Mhm.
having to delve back into uncomfortable memories, I know can be like super challenging. So even maybe like share, if you can, like about that in terms of like how it has been to confront some of that stuff along this journey.
Um, Not easy. I had to go back to therapy,
Yeah.
um, which is not a bad thing. And now I'm,
Yeah.
in it just to continue to progress and
Yeah.
ditch some limiting beliefs and things like that. But
Yeah.
um, there was a time that it brought me down quite a bit, and I think it was part and parcel because I was postpartum, uh, and drudging up all of these old things. But what came of it, I think, ultimately was really beautiful, and being able to, actually get myself back into that place where I
Mhm.
was, so that I can relate to the people who are maybe in that place now, that was tough because I've done so much work for so many years to pull myself up out of those trenches.
Yeah.
But it unequivocally was worth it to get back in that place, just to maybe pull others out. And I was I'm glad that I'm glad that you appreciate like how much effort was put into it, because truly, if as you continue to read, you'll see that it's basically it's written in a very specific order
Mhm.
to start where you're at now
Yeah.
and take you to places where only our hearts can imagine.
Yeah.
And that was very intentional. The
Mhm.
language in the very beginning is very simple.
Yeah.
And as you go, it gets a little bit more complex, a little bit more almost not necessarily imaginative, but, less survival speak, more up in the prefrontal cortex. So you're going on this journey to get up out of survival mode.
Yeah.
And I was very intentional about all of that.
Yeah.
So it's basically like, as you read, it's like having me in your pocket as your coach. and telling you these are the things you need to do,
Yeah.
lovingly get off
Yeah.
your butt and do them.
Yeah.
And this is why. And I think that's part of sometimes what we miss is the why. We hear the things, but people don't want to necessarily be told what to do.
Mhm.
um, they want to be shown how to be.
Yeah.
And if I can do that through some of my experiences and share that,
Mhm.
and then give them the why this works, then
Yeah.
they're going to be more inclined to be like, maybe I should try that. So
But I think there is sincere like authenticity to being like I've walked this path. I'm not saying you have to walk along with me, but should you choose to, I want to be a beacon for you. I want to be like you're saying, like a mentor, a coach. I just want to help it so you don't, essentially it's like you're trying to like make it somewhat easier for them through all of like the lessons that you had to learn probably the hard way, like we all do. Yeah, like being that little bit of like a guiding light. I think there's something so like trustworthy about it, because you're like, yeah, like this was my shit, I want to help you with yours, essentially.
yeah, yeah,
um
yes, 100%.
and I guess maybe talk to me about how have you wrestled with putting yourself out there in this way, because obviously you've already been like out there. Like I think probably one of the first times I came across you is with like you do these great I don't know if you do them on TikTok and then they go to Instagram, or vice versa, like these great sort of like short like but like raw sort of like in your face videos where it's like you're very like you have a very sort of like no nonsense approach, but it's not mean or demeaning or anything like that, but you're just kind of like, these are the facts, this is how it is, there's no muss, no fuss, all that kind of
Yep.
thing. So that's kind of like how I sort of came across you. And then in this book, like you share some very, like personal information from like your journey and your mental health and all that kind of thing. And I can like look at it like, I sort of share, certain bits and pieces about my life and from my past. And, like I talk about my dad's suicide a lot, because not a lot, because that sounds weird, but I put it out there so that like, because some people aren't comfortable talking about it. And whereas I'm in a place that I am comfortable talking about it. So I try to talk because others can't. And so how have you either found that process or had to reconcile with going, you know what, I just have to kind of like put it out there and I can't really control what comes back?
um that was very hard in the beginning. uh and ironically, I mentioned this all started because I was going to do a yoga app, and I joined this group
Mhm.
for entrepreneurs that was kind of like learning how business works and how marketing works and all of these things. And so we had weekly calls, and on one of these weekly calls, I may or may not have had a meltdown and shared some of my very personal experiences, and where I was or where I had been and where I was now. And everybody was dead silent. And I was like, I'm just going to log off now.
Like abort.
Yes. Yes. And they all went, so that's your story. Like, you need to own that. You need to share that. That is how you're going to connect to people. Like this, don't try to be like some kind of yoga guru. Like, you just need to be you. And I was like, but me, I'm, and it's because we don't want people to see us, right? And then we realize, I realized little by little, and podcasting was actually a huge part of that, that people did actually find it helpful to hear my story, and that, I didn't get as much backlash as I thought I was going to get. I mean, there's always some naysayers, but it really, little by little, I've shared more and more and more. And I still have things that I haven't put out there, because some of them I'm still struggling with, or it's happening in real time, or it's, I'm not ready, and that's okay. That I think that job security is all that is, it's going to keep unfolding. But, it was very hard initially to get over myself, honestly. And just do it, even though I was very scared. And I think the biggest part of it was, I had a lot of family that didn't even know that I had struggled so bad. And so I was like, so I had to make a couple phone calls and be like, so before you listen to that podcast episode, and so there were a lot of hard conversations that needed to be had. And now that it's all out there, I'm like, whew, I should have done that years ago. Like the amount of freedom that comes with just being your authentic self and not feeling like you have to hide anything. I can't even begin to explain the night and day difference of where I was 10 years ago to now.
Yeah. Well, I commend you, because it's hard. It is hard to, we know as first responders, or as former first responders, like, vulnerability is tough. And especially in the roles that we did, like, it was, you just fucking shut that shit down. And so then to be vulnerable and put ourselves out there, whether it's writing a book, podcast conversation, all that kind of thing, it's a choice, but it's a hard one. So I commend you for it, because I can imagine it, took a lot out of you.
It did. And I have been very fortunate to build this, whatever this is that I'm doing, to build it slowly and intentionally. I've not come into it or approached it from a place of lack or urgency, where I feel like I have to succeed at this thing. That has started to creep in a couple times, and I shut it down, because that's an avenue to burnout, and we don't do that here. So, so it's a different way of being. But it feels pretty great.
That's awesome. And so if there's like people who are either like just hearing about the book, or they're like, oh, like that sounds, really interesting. I guess maybe, and it's probably wrapped up in the entire conversation that we've had, but what's like the main, I guess, takeaway that you want people to know, either from like reading the book or being interested in it, or that kind of thing?
nothing has to be at rock bottom for you to start taking care of yourself. And it's not about fixing anything. It's just about growth and evolution. So even if you're in this weird middle ground of burnout and you're not, your life may not be completely unraveling or falling apart, it's never too early to start preventing it. And it's never too late to recover. And the bottom line in all of it is you're worth it. You're worth the intentional effort to put towards yourself. And it's not selfish.
Yep. I love that. I love everything about that. Thank you for sharing. Where can people find Beat the Burnout, as I give it another plug for those watching?
So Amazon is, it's also at any place books are sold. But you can get signed copies at akdozanti.com.
Which is what I should have done, because I got mine on Amazon. And now I'm like, man.
Well, now we're just gonna have to meet in person.
Meet up, drink some wine.
100%. So but yeah, everything is linked up there. You can get to my socials there. All of the things is at akdozanti.com. So
okay, awesome. I will put all of that in the show notes. And so if people are interested in coaching with you, accessing Lifesaver Wellness, all of those things, they can just reach out to you by then.
Yep.
Happy days. And you said sort of, you dropped a few little like breadcrumbs about, that there's more to come. Is there anything you want to share that, either you're working on, you want to be working on, anything that you have coming up that you're really excited about that you'd love to share?
I think it's in the vault for now.
That's okay.
Soon enough. It'll all come out soon enough. Yes.
I've from our offline conversation, I think you are really excited to have some downtime after a very full-on few months.
Yes. I had a lot of speaking engagements back to back. And so the next couple months is pretty slow, just a couple of small gigs. And I'm excited to just lean into mom life and summer and just letting myself recalibrate.
Yep. Beating the burnout, as one might say.
Yes, as one might say.
All right, AK, this has been awesome. Thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We normally finish these podcasts off with asking our guests a couple of questions, and it comes from the name of the podcast, I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness, which it was evolved from a Brené Brown quote. And so we like to say, what do you do to be able to hold space for your darkness?
I let it happen. I let it, I invite it in, I dance with it. I allow myself to witness it. And when necessary, I allow myself to feel it. It's not about fixing. It's just about being able to be present with it, because the more you try to shove it away or the more you run from it, the bigger and badder it gets. And so invite it in, dance with it, and acknowledge its existence. And oftentimes you find that it's not quite as dark as you thought it was going to be.
Dance with it. I like that.
Yeah.
And equally, what can someone do, whether it's a friend, whether it's your spouse, loved one, anything like that, what can someone do in order to help you and give you that space to be able to hold on to your darkness?
Me specifically?
Yeah. Or just or a suggestion. What can someone do to support you?
Oh, I mean, so me specifically, don't try to rescue. I actually wrote a whole song about it like a few years ago. Like, I don't need to be rescued.
Yeah.
And the next line after that is, it says, she doesn't need to be rescued. She just needs to be loved.
Oof.
That's what the song says. But I think it's just, be real. Don't give me some inspirational quote or some thing that you wrote on ChatGPT. Just presence, eye contact, no judgment, and just being authentic and not trying to rescue.
Yep. Yep. Which
it's so stupidly simple, but it's true.
You know though, like I want to be like overly like gendered, but being married to a man who is in a first responder role, all they think that you need, it's like their automatic go-to is like, oh, I need to come in and solve this for her. I need to come in and rescue her. And you're like, mate, I can rescue myself. Just
that might just be men in general. Yes.
No, I like that. Yeah, I don't need you. I don't need you to rescue me. I just need your company, and that's it.
Yeah,
I love that. I
just
love that.
Just sit with me.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, again, thank you so much for your time, AK. I really, really appreciate it. I will put everything in the show notes as we move ahead, and I will let you crack on with the rest of your day.
You too. I have thoroughly enjoyed this, so
Me too.
I really appreciate the invite, and I'm glad we did this.
Me too. All right, this has been another episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. I've been your host, Erin Jane, and as always, let me listen in a way you've never been heard. Cheers.
Hi guys, it's Erin Jane here. Firstly, thank you for listening to I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. This podcast really is for you, the listener, and I hope you're finding as much value in listening to these conversations as I am in having them. If you'd like to offer any feedback, suggest a subject matter, are interested in being a podcast guest, or would like to get in contact to receive first responder life and wellness coaching services, please reach out. You can find me on Instagram at Erin Jane Coaching or the dedicated podcast account, ErinJane_Darkness Podcast, or my website, www.erinjanecoaching.com. I look forward to hearing from you, and I'm so grateful to have you as part of this darkness community. Cheers.